Hey guys, psych, this is not a show. This is a conference. Yeah, what's going on? Take on the world. I can't keep my conferences straight. I want to make sure I'm like, man, I hope I got the right one. Take on the world. You know, I don't want to brag or anything, but I've been around since the beginning. Yeah. I remember my first Take on the World show, conference or talk. My tech went wrong. Guys, well, just so nothing goes wrong, I've invited a friend today, Vicki Joy. And Vic, it's a true story. I was we were at some campground up near in Strongsville, and I had everything ready, and my tech did not work,
Oh no.
and I basically was just like I was going in blind, and I got so much feedback, so much good feedback, right, from that
Yeah.
first year. How many years has it been? It's been like 6 years or something like that. I
Wow.
lost track,
Wow.
and I had people just all day long. Ministry was happening, freedom encounters, prayer, all of that stuff. And I was wore out. I remember I had to go to the restroom, and I had to sneak down to the restroom to go because it was a real crazy busy day. But and
Wow.
then we've been so many different places. We were up on the lake, we were down in just about less than an hour south of me last year, and I've made so many friends at this conference, and we've seen so much ministry. So I just always feel so welcome there. And I am
Mm.
glad to be back for another year. And, hey, we're still doing the same thing. I'm talking about the same thing this year as I did the first year.
Mm.
And we want to reach hearts and minds with this message, okay? The message is that Jesus Christ is the only way, and he has defeated the enemy, and he can set you free. He can break strongholds, and the message is it doesn't matter where you've been, it matters where you're going.
Mm.
Okay, but we have a mission that's different than other people. Okay, and our mission is to expose the darkness in a way that a lot of people are fearful of. Okay, the things that we talk about, the places that we go, they like hearing the stories, but
Right.
the idea of being involved themselves is very frightening. So, Vic, I'm glad I have you on here. And we're just going to kind of do what we normally do, have a conversation. And I have a few slides I want to show to try to catch people up to date. But if anybody knows me, I want to mention real quick. At the I think the second Take on the World conference is where I met your friends, and I probably shouldn't name drop, but I don't care. The Fugelbergs, right?
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
And I remember I didn't know who these people were, but every time I got up to speak, that was the year that I had so much stuff. Like Chris and Liz, they had me jumping. I was hopping from place to place, and every time I showed up, I looked out and there was this family there.
Oh cool.
And yeah, I didn't know who they were. They introduced themselves, and then a couple years went by and I didn't see them, and then we got connected again. So anyway, just man, lots of great memories. But
Mm.
um, Vic, yeah, satanic ritual abuse. We're going to talk about that today, and I specifically want to talk about cover-ups. I want to talk about the stigma, the
Hmm.
fear of that among Christians, that it should just not be, and then also remind me at the end, we're going to talk about the new Satanic Panic campaign where they're trying to cover this up again, or they're trying to bring out this campaign, this disinformation campaign, and say that it's not real. okay, and that it never was real. And well, our listeners know better than that. So, but I want to ask you, when that came across your radar, okay, we talked the other night about, watching movies as a kid. When did it come across your radar that this was a real thing?
The actual like SRA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is crazy. I don't know if I can place the date. Somewhere around 2001, 2002, something like that. I was at a church at the time in Minneapolis, and I got very heavily involved in Johnny Erickson Tada's ministry. She's the I don't know, quadriplegic.
Right.
And I would go every summer to these retreats. They were these family retreats, and they were amazing. And I was at them in several different states, depending on where I was living. And so it was a family camp where families would come for a week of respite. And so you would be assigned a child with a special need. And then mom and dad could have date nights and Bible studies together and take classes and do all this stuff. And then you would hang out with the kids, and they had everything. They had like jumpy houses and arts and crafts and sports and zip lines, and they're amazing camps.
I love jumpy houses.
Oh man, never too old for a jumpy house. And one night, it was the coolest experience, Tom. There was a karaoke night, and you just haven't lived until you experience Johnny Camp karaoke, and it was just awesome. So after they cleaned everything up and everyone left, there was about 5 or 6 of us women that stayed up till like 2 a.m. just talking, and it got really deep, and people were sharing their stories, and we wound up just like a cappella, like singing hymns together, and the acoustics in the room. It was just one of those nights I'll never forget. Well, one of the women in this group, someone said like, "Oh, you have such a beautiful family. You have such a beautiful daughter." She had many, many children. And she's like, "Yeah," she's like, "I was never supposed to have children," and begins to tell a story about growing up in a generational Satanism home and all of the abuse that she endured that would have prohibited her from ever having children, and how all how she was a breeder. And I absolutely 100% believed every word she said, Tom, but I had never heard anything like that in the context of reality. I'd only seen that kind of hinted at in horror movies. And it was one of those things where I didn't have a compartment in my head for it. I didn't know what to do with it, but I did believe it. And I filed it way back into the recesses of my mind, like that one time, that sort of a thing. So when years and years later, I became familiar with Russ's teaching, and it was all familiar. It was just the overlay, and that memory came back, and I thought, oh, that woman wasn't just this one time. She was a spokesperson for many, many, many people. And little did I know that wasn't just one rare woman that I would meet one time in my life.
Wow. That's incredible. I have a lot of stories like that, of having memories from conversations, as I'm growing up. And when I learned about this later, when I really got a grip on it, after I met Russ, I mean, I knew about the cults and Satanism and all those things, and I understood it, but I didn't understand the sophistication of the network.
Yes,
and
exactly.
When I wrapped my brain around that, I began to go back, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. So that explains this, that explains this, that explains this. Everything falls into place. So then another thing that happened with me is I had people that were close to me, friends of mine, that were supportive of me. And they, they were like, okay, yeah, that's cool, Tom, whatever. But then somebody came into their life that was SRA, and their minds were blown, and they took me a lot more seriously. And I know 2 close friends that happened to, and they called me up and they told me the story, and my mind's blown. You know what I'm saying? I'm like,
yeah,
wow,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and Tom, this kind of fits in with kind of what we're talking about now, with we want to get people comfortable with the fact that you don't have to be afraid of this kind of a ministry or this kind of work. around the time that I first started listening to Russ, I wasn't living in the same state as my dad, and my dad was sending me links. And so I literally had just scratched the surface. I had just heard maybe him talk a couple times. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. Within a 6-month period, I had 2 people come up to me and talk about someone who they knew who was schizophrenic or crazy and was about to be institutionalized. And they laid out the whole SRA scenario. But the people who were talking to me were like, this person's crazy, pray for them, they're going to be in a mental institution the rest of their life. Tom, it haunts me to this day. I had the answer for them at that point. I had the answer. I could have told them, your friend isn't crazy. This is classic satanic ritual abuse. This person's programming is breaking. These are real memories. I had the answers for them, Tom. Twice this happened to me in 6 months. And I was scared to say something because I thought they'd think I was crazy. Total like not confident in the material, not confident I'd be taken seriously. They're going to think, then they're going to think I'm crazy. And I was going through a lot at that time in my life, having just lost my mother. And so that kind of haunts me, Tom. And that is sort of what spurred me forward after I did learn more and I got more confident in speaking about what it actually is, because it haunts me that I had an opportunity to help 2 people and I let it slip through my fingers.
Well, hindsight's always 2020, right? And I have a lot of missed opportunities. And I just want to say that's kind of like maybe there's like a myth out there about people like us. You wrote a book on sleep paralysis, so you are a pro, Vicki. You are an expert and you never miss an opportunity. And people they're like, man, I wish I could be as bold as you. Well, Paul prayed for boldness. You know what I'm saying? And how bold was he? I'm not bold in every situation, and sometimes I don't know what to do. But I think the most important thing is to learn. Yeah. And I've caught myself over the past 14 years, like walking away from a situation. Then I'm like, oh shoot, yeah, you set that up, didn't you, Lord? And I missed it. So I want to make sure I didn't miss it again. Now I've definitely been able to, execute, in a good situation, and the Lord's totally done it. So we live and we learn, and the bad thing would be if we didn't learn from those things. Right. So, I remember, just as an example, I remember I was on my lunch break and somebody was wanting change at a restaurant that I was at, and I was in a hurry and I was like, I don't have any change. What I meant was I didn't have any coins. Okay. But I was like unwilling to give this guy, any, dollar bills or any, whatever, and that I was really convicted leaving, that situation. So I made sure I kept money on me at all times for if anybody needed anything. That was a learning experience for me. And I have a ton of those, like, for some reason, a lot of them happen on my lunch break. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm in a hurry and I'm like, okay, I'll get in trouble if I don't get back to work on time. But I'll see somebody that needs something and I'm like, I got to turn around, Yeah. So
I think that's a ploy of the devil too. I think sometimes as Christians, we are in a situation like it might be a homeless person or something. That's a good example. And we're thinking, okay, I'm just going to walk quickly by. I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to say I don't have money. And then we're with a friend who takes the time and stops and sits with them. Like this happened to me once when I was in Scotland, and my friend didn't walk past. She sat down and talked to him and had her arm around him. She came back with his whole life story and how he had lost his family. And I was so humiliated and shamed in that moment, because that's what the enemy likes to do. Like, man, Vic, you're a real jerk. And she had compassion on this person. But what we have to do when we look at those situations, it's not look at it like, oh man, look how Russ would have handled this situation, or look how Tom Dunn would have handled this, or look how Vicki would have handled that situation when someone brought up sleep paralysis. The fact of the matter is, when we do see someone do it better than we would have done it, that's not Satan. That's God saying to us, I'm showing you an actual example because you don't know how to do it. And now the next time you're alone and this happens, now you have this picture in your brain. You've been given this example and you can emulate that. You can mimic that. So there are learning opportunities, and we just have to be so careful not to turn them inward and just make it about us and feel like failures because someone else handled it better than we did.
No, I think that's exactly right. And we can't set the bar so high that we think we can never, get up there. Russ, man, of course, we lost him a little over a year ago. And, take on the world community. We also lost Rob Skiba a year ago. But Russ, both of those guys, they did things, and I saw them do things that nobody else saw. And they kept it a secret, you know what I'm saying, helping people and things like that. But man, the lesson from Russ, it was always about the person that was right in front of him. When I'm on a mission, I focus on the finish line, and I don't see out of my peripheral people that need things on the side of me, just because. And I think that's part of my personality. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, I'm so goal oriented that I miss stuff around me. And this is not what this talk is about today. But I mean, I think it fits in there, and we can. There's something to be learned about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the context of what we're talking about today. So, anyway, as I was mentioning, Vic, we lost Russ a little over a year ago. And Russ was the number one guy in the world doing what he does. There's lots of other people out there that that have been doing that ministry. And I think Russ was the best of the best, period. He learned the hard way, and I saw him just engage somebody, and he could help them more in about 45 minutes than the counselor that they had been meeting with for years had helped them. But his skill was so sharp that he could really look at somebody and observe them physically before even engaging spiritual discernment and know what was going on. He could tell just by, their body language, their eyes, things like that. And then, of course, he had, very sharp spiritual discernment as well. There was many times that I've been with him, and he would, afterwards, he's like, "Did you see that?" And I was like, "No, I didn't see it." I'm like, "What am I missing?" Then he explains it to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I did see that, Or sometimes I was like, "No, I didn't. I totally missed that," And I'm sitting there trying to learn something, and I did it. But so Russ was the best of the best. And he went on over, what I'm saying, into Zion. And here we are. I think it's very fitting that a year later that we're doing conferences. I've done several of them in the last couple months, and recorded things, and went to Louisville, Kentucky, Pennsylvania this last weekend. And we're still talking about this. We're carrying on the legacy. Vic, I didn't pick this. I got a long list of other things that I would rather do. And I honestly, I kind of fantasize about doing other things. I could very easily be cool with a lot of other stuff I've got ideas for, but I am compelled to keep showing up here and exposing these things. One of the reasons is I've been trained to do it. Another reason is nobody else is doing it. But the biggest reason is I feel called to do it. Okay. And I don't believe everybody is called to do exactly what we do. But I believe that the people that are not called to be where we're at, they need to support us. Okay. And that could come in many different ways. All right. That could come prayer, financial. That could come just by sharing, what we do, and just saying, "Hey, watch this movie or read this book," or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're gonna, when you learn about Vicki's book, Sleep Paralysis, what's going to happen is somebody's going to show up in your life that needs this. Okay. And maybe you just give them the book or point them towards the book or tell them to watch an interview or something like that. or maybe you yourself read the book and then you help them, you minister to them. It could be any number of things. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to break this stigma of fear when it comes to Satanism. We should not have fear as Christians when dealing with these things. We should come from a position of power and authority, and no fear, really. Vic, when I was growing up, I saw on TV, I saw movies that we rented. There were scary movies, horror movies, and many of them had to do with a satanic cult. Okay. Mm-hmm. I remember watching the movie, The Fall of the House of Usher. And I don't know if you've ever seen this movie.
Yes.
Have you seen this movie?
I have. Yep.
In that movie, there's a scene, there's like a satanic cult, right? Mm-hmm. Operating in that castle. Is that like an Edgar Allan Poe thing?
It is. It is.
And Vincent Price was in it. But I'm telling you what, that scared me, right? Hollywood has went on to make gazillions of dollars, off of movies that are about Satanism, satanic cults, covens, witchcraft, satanic worship, satanic rituals, all of those things. And I say this all the time. It's kind of funny how they reject our God, but they like this. Vicki, you said it. Where would the occult be if it weren't for the Bible, right?
That's right. That's right. Get your own religion.
Yeah. Everything they believe is taken from the devil in our Bible. Yeah. So,
yeah. Anyway, absolutely. Well, and Hollywood, not to get off on a big tangent, but absolutely art imitating life in this situation. And as we get more and more down the line and Hollywood gets more and more sophisticated, these movies where they're showing satanic rituals and things, many of them are right on point. Russ mentioned specific movies where like that's pretty much as close as you can get. They're mimicking these things exactly, like the same way. If I was from another country and I wasn't familiar with American culture, I could watch television. If I saw a movie of someone getting married, that bridal ceremony, it mimics exactly our bridal ceremony. You would get an idea of what an American wedding was like if you watched a movie with that in it. And so it's the same thing with a lot of these rituals and these things that they're showing us in the films. It is art imitating life. And I think that it actually was an old podcast with Russ Dizdar years and years ago when I first started listening. He said that a woman who had come out of witchcraft had contacted him and said the spells in the Harry Potter books are actual spells. If kids run around incantating, mimicking their favorite lines from the movies, that those are actual spells that they use in rituals.
So no doubt Hollywood loves this subject. And, I'll ask people sometimes, like, what's scarier, a movie like The Exorcist or a movie like Nightmare on Elm Street? They always say The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm like, why? Well, they're like, Freddy Krueger is not very realistic, but we know that this is real. Okay. And of course, the movie The Exorcist is very exploitive, and it's based on a real case. We covered this on our show, Vic, but it's very Hollywoodized and very, dramatic in the way that it portrays a demon-possessed person. It can get pretty intense, but it's not going to get that intense. Okay. And again, Hollywood version, it's going to be a Catholic priest taking on the devil, taking on a demon, and the priest has probably got some kind of vulnerability, weakness. It's usually an old man. And I always said that if they were to make a movie about a Christian with authority taking on a demon, it would be over real quick. It would be real boring, okay, for the most part. But yeah,
there's a dual agenda going on in those, especially like look at like the vampire movies. They are not only exploiting and glorifying their own demonic rituals and entities, but they are simultaneously making the church look extremely weak and impotent in almost every one of these movies. And I always cite the old 80s Stephen King version of Salem's Lot. There's the scene where the priest brings out his little cross, and the vampire kind of snarls at it. But the guy just laughs at him, and he's like, "You have to have faith for that. And do you have faith?" And he starts mocking the priest, and the priest is then shaking and is, and then succumbs to this vampire, because surely his faith was not big enough to overcome a monster with yellow teeth.
Right. Well, Vic, I want to kind of get in just a little bit of the basics. Okay, we're not going to go real deep here, but I'm going to share some slides, and I need to kind of jump over here to this other window, and we're just going to talk about a few things, and then we're going to just kind of talk about SRA. So crash course in satanic ritual abuse. First thing we need to do is we need to define the other types of Satanism. I'm going to do that real quick, okay? There are four main types of Satanism: atheistic Satanism, and that Satanism. Let me know if I put this like this. Can you still see what's going on? Can you still see the?
Yep.
Okay, so your atheistic Satanists. Okay, here's examples: Anton LaVey, Lucian Greaves. Anton LaVey wrote the Satanic Bible, and he started the Church of Satan. Lucian Greaves he came out about 10 years ago, and he was kind of like a political guy, and he was starting the Satanic Temple for political reasons. He claims he's even more atheist than Anton LaVey. Anyway, I don't believe either one of them, because they're Satanists and they don't believe in the 10 Commandments. They don't believe in not lying. They both are involved in, rituals, summoning demons and sending demons. Okay. So they're hypocrites. The next one is theistic Satanism. Here's a guy, E.A. Coetting, and he's got thousands and thousands of followers. He believes in magic. He believes in the devil. He does rituals for the purpose of summoning and sending demons. He makes no bones about it. He's like, I'm not an atheist. I believe that the devil is God, and I'm going to summon demons and get power. Okay. Experimenters. Okay. Vic, you and we just did a show about this the other night. These are the kids that you see at the mall. Okay. Here's an example of experimenter Satanist. Okay. Milwaukee roommates Rebecca Chandler and Raven Larrabee arrested for satanic sex torture. Okay. I think we have a couple other examples. We talked about this on our show the other night. Satanic murder, St. Joseph, Missouri. Amanda Bennett and Sebastian Dowell, they lured a girl out into the woods and killed her in a satanic sacrifice. So these are what we call experimenters. We used to call them dabblers, but that sounds a little bit too innocent. So anyway, this is a piece from the article. A teenager pleaded guilty to the murder Monday, telling the judge the death was related to satanic worship. Amanda Bennett, 17, pleaded guilty to a charge of second-degree murder in the death of Caitlin Root last October. So anyway, that's your experimenters, and I would say very dangerous, okay? Experimenters can fall under theistic Satanism or even atheistic Satanism. The Satanic Temple, they don't care. They seem desperate for members, and they'll take anybody, it seems like. So the last group I want to talk about are undergrounders, Luciferians. I should have also put up there generational Satanist, okay? And these are the guys that pass down their traditions, their religion, from generation to generation to generation for millennia, okay? And they're the ones where we get satanic ritual abuse, okay? What is satanic ritual abuse? You might want to tune out, okay, if you can't handle gruesome stuff. But satanic ritual abuse, extreme traumatizing abuse in the setting of a satanic ritual. Hollywood has done a great job of showing us what these kind of rituals look like. Okay, if you look at the slide there, you can see somebody in a pentagram, and well, there's blood coming out there, and I don't even know what this slide's from. It could be from a movie or something like that, probably.
Hey,
But
Tom, I don't
yeah,
think the slides are advancing for the folks watching. We're still
oh,
on
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so maybe you didn't see any of that. Anyway, so well, that's okay. We're gonna do another one, and StreamYard.com is sharing a window. I don't know what that means. How about now?
It still just has the 4 main types of Satanism slide up with atheistic as the top bullet point.
Okay, okay. Well, anyway, folks, I'm gonna. Well, we're almost done with this anyway. One more slide. So, the slide here: extreme traumatizing abuse in the setting of a satanic ritual, and let me. Well, hold on here. It's got me locking up now. So, oh, okay. Wow. So you didn't see any of that, but that's okay. I talked about it. And stop sharing that. So, satanic rituals, performed by generational Satanists, okay, are pretty insane. Okay, we're talking about sexual abuse to children. Okay, we're talking about torture. We're talking about being made to participate in animal abuse, animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, drinking of blood, cannibalism. Okay, and this is how we get the DID, the MPD, multiple personality disorder, because when somebody is traumatized in that way, the psyche can't handle it, and it has to do something. So what happens is it breaks like a piece of glass, okay, and it breaks into different personalities. The cults know this, and then they use that to program these children, okay. So anyway, this is just a crash course in it. We're not going into detail. The main thing that we want to talk about is the stigma and dealing with that, okay. Vic, I remember when I first found Russ Dizdar and I began listening to him, and there was something that was so genuine and sincere about him. He was saying the most insane things, but he seemed like he was sane, and he seemed like he really loved the Lord, and he seemed like he was really sold out to Jesus, you know. And I was really, really pulled in. And I'll tell you what, one of the first things I was like, okay, I'm going to catch this guy. This is too good to be true. And I'm going to find whatever's going on with this guy, because I just don't think that this is real. So I waited and I listened to him, and I loved listening to him. And then one time I heard him mention the book of Enoch, and I was like, got you. I got you. I knew it. Okay. But then in the next sentence, he said, you know what? That's not canon. And he explained why he mentioned that book, and he explained where that book has its place, you know? And I was like, oh man, okay. Okay. And then I began getting confirmation from other people in my life and just different sources. And I remember the weekend, and I think I have the book here. I'm going to show you. I was reading excerpts from this book, The Franklin Cover-Up. And I remember the weekend, and it was on a Saturday afternoon, and my mom came over to visit, and I was freaked out. I was really freaked out. And I pulled her in. I pulled her into my office, and I was whispering. I'm like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. Mom, this is real. This is real. And I was shaking, and I was scared, Vic. I was like, if these people find out that I know that it's real, they could come after me. And I had that fear. I remember one day I was at work, and I thought, I've gone too far. I need to back out of this right now. I need to erase any evidence that I ever knew anything about this. And I was at work. I thought, I'm going to clock out and I'm going to go home and I'm going to erase my hard drive. That I had, that's where I was. That's what I was going through. And I was spiritually and biblically not strong enough to handle the type of things that that I was taking in. And then there came a point where I passed the point of no return. I remember I had the idea. I'll say this first. I had the idea. I was like, I want to make a film about this. And I began to tell my friend who, him and I, we did film projects together, what I wanted to do. And he said, absolutely not. No way. Count me out. I want nothing to do with that.
Wow.
And he didn't even want to talk about it. He was so scared when I explained to him. And I said, I'm scared too, but I was a little bit excited about it. Okay. And anyway, I remember I passed the point of no return and I took fear off the table and I was able to move forward. And I realized, okay, I got the confidence, okay, and I got strong biblically. I got a good foundation. And I realized the enemy can't do anything to me unless God allows it, and that I'm protected, and that we're in a war, and that regardless if I do this or not, I'm still going to be attacked. So when I began to hear the stories and I got closer to Russ and I spent more time with Russ, I said, I got to help these people because nobody else is going to do it. No, and there's nobody trained to do it. So, excuse me. But, and then as I say, I passed the point of no return, and it was very, how do I want to say this? It was very empowering to take away the fear. And I suspect, Vicki, that there are a lot of people out there that might be listening, watching this presentation right now, that could be a lot like I was back then. Where absolutely. I was fearful and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't even know about this. I got to erase the evidence, all of those things. And I just got stronger and stronger. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. I'm resonating with so much of what you're saying. And, you know, Tom, I think you and I were probably a lot alike in high school. I think we kind of had the same personality and some of the same like edges and interests. And I like to think that if we had been in the same high school, we would have been buds. But one of the things that kind of hit me in my teens, and it was extraordinarily, it brought on a sense of hopelessness. I thought really the only big things this world has to offer is you graduate from high school, you graduate from college, you get a car, you fall in love, you get married, you have a couple kids. And then it's like all that kind of happens rapidly in succession within like 10 years after you get out of high school. And then it's like, it's over. You've experienced everything that life, all of the best things life has to offer. You know, you've done it all. And now it's like, now what do? World travel? Like try to make $1 million? Like what? I was to a point of hopelessness in high school because I thought if I get out of school and just go college, car, husband, kids, then it's like you have everything. And I had this overwhelming sense that there had to be more to the world because this formula, this American dream formula, is so boring. And I'm not saying that those aren't good gifts and that God doesn't give them and you can't look forward to or enjoy those things. But what I'm saying is I lived in an unaware sense of sort of hopeless boredom and despair over just how just boring it all was. And so when I had my red pill moment, as they call it, you know, with listening to Russ and hearing all of this stuff that was going on, I experienced everything that you did. I had the same phone call, except I was living in another state. And I remember I was living with a bunch of friends at the time and I didn't want them to think I was crazy. And I remember taking my cell phone and like hiding out in the bushes and be like, Dad, it's real. You know, same thing, right? And my dad, who's been on this bandwagon since, you know, he was about 12, was like, I told you, you know what I mean? But I was freaked out too. And I had but once I settled down and I got over the terror of it, it was like, I knew it. I knew we were meant for more than just a job and a paycheck and living for a weekend or buying a new car. I knew there was something more. And understanding that, yeah, this stuff is scary, but we are actually like soldiers in this cosmic war, and we're going to win, and we have a part in it. I was alive for the first time in my life, to sound melodramatic, but the decades of boredom and hopelessness that I didn't even know I was struggling with were stripped off. And the fear was still there in the beginning, but I couldn't believe that life was 1,000 times more exciting than I'd ever been told it was.
Vic, I resonate so much with what you said, and there's no doubt we would have been buds in high school.
That's right.
So, I totally forgot what I was going to say. Hold on. Just what you're saying, you know what I'm saying? And the fear. I remember I was at a conference. We were in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Russ was speaking, and this guy came out, towards the end where Russ was speaking. I thought he was going to have a panic attack or a nervous breakdown. It was a young kid, and he was torn because he was fearful, but he was like, I gotta do something. I gotta get involved. And he was shaken, and he was tore up, and he was crying, and he was having a fit. And I remember when Russ finally got out to talk to him, he said what I've already mentioned, was taking fear off of the table. Take fear off the table. You know what? We're not going to get out of this life alive. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a death wish, and I'm not suicidal, right? But we've got to do this. The safest place we can be is in the center of God's will. Okay. Amen. So, and I had to learn that for my kids too, because, I send my kids out on mission trips, or they go, and my daughter's very involved, and, she goes to dangerous places trying to save babies and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, Lord, she's yours. She's yours. And, if I said I wasn't concerned, I would be lying. I'm concerned, and I check in on her when I know she's going to, different places, and I pray for her, and I'm like, Lord, I got to turn this over to you. I used to have anxiety years and years ago, and the Lord delivered me from that. And I realized that none of us are promised tomorrow. Okay. It's better to, I'm not saying that we're any kind of heroes or anything like that. I'd rather die a hero or die brave than live and be a coward.
Right.
So, and folks, I hope this is encouraging to you. People are like, wow, you're so brave, or how do you do it? I'm not. God supplies the increase. I don't like these people. I know they're dangerous. They kill babies, human sacrifice, so they wouldn't think twice about doing something to me. Okay. And they, what they would rather do is discredit me. What they would rather do is just, bring something else against me in some way. But they could care less if I take another breath. Okay. Trust me. They've said as much. So they hate our guts, and they are desperately trying to discredit us. And they've been doing this for years, of course. Vic, we're going to talk about the reemergence of the satanic panic. Okay. So can you kind of jump into that and explain, first of all, what was the satanic panic and what's happening now?
Yeah. So back in the 80s, and most of us were teenagers then, and it was starting to come out, all of these mutilations, and it was coming out that there was all this satanic crime and teenagers dabbling in all of this stuff. And this, of course, was the era of heavy metal, and all of the albums had the pentagrams and stuff on there. And so once the cat sort of prematurely got out of the bag that this kind of stuff really was happening, and this was an era where parents were paying attention, and parents would actually say, you're not allowed to listen to that album, and we're getting rid of your posters. And they were on point back then. So they had to kind of they had to get the cat back in the bag, right? And so they enlisted the help of, Geraldo and Phil Donahue and all the big, the big timers, right? And they would have these people on their shows just completely discrediting this, that it was all just to sell albums and it's all just hype and kids needing attention and whatnot. Oh, the mental illness and the woman schizophrenic, all the classic lines. And it really did. I'm one of those people, Tom. If you can get a pithy little phrase that rhymes, you can change the course of the entire world. We saw it in the OJ trial. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. I mean, a guy got off of a murder charge because someone came up with a rhyme about a glove, right? And so Satanic Panic just had that perfect little ring to it. It embedded in everyone's mind. It was repeated ad nauseum 10 million times, to the point where 40 years later, everybody still thinks that was this big kooky time in the 80s. And so we haven't really heard a lot about it until, I think, I'm going to pin it on the last season of Stranger Things. We've got Dungeons and Dragons Club in a high school. They're all wearing their Hellfire Club jerseys. Hellfire Club, a real secret society in early America. Look up Ben Franklin. And they're actually mockingly reading out of the Newsweek, that the actual Satanic Panic article that was in 86 or whenever that was. And they're starting now to pull that out of their back pocket again. But now, instead of a couple old irrelevant talk show hosts, they have the entire internet, all of social media, all of woke America. They have 10 million more bullhorns now in 2022 than they did in 1986. So they're now beginning to say again that now when if you Google satanic crime, stuff will come up. We did a whole show a night or two ago. It's not even buried. Now, granted, not every crime that is satanic is postulated that way by the media, but you can find plenty of articles online where they say, I did this for Satan, I heard voices, this is a slender man, whatever. And so they're pulling this back out of their pocket. And there was a video, I'll end on this, Tom. There was a video I saw the other day, a little 8-minute video with some young, trendy, eye-rolling journalist talking about these radical Christians who are so afraid that they're going to lose their rank as number one religion in America. Like that's the thing we're afraid of, right? Losing our power. And there was some line in there about how children in danger aren't being rescued when we throw all of our resources chasing after phantom SRA victims. And it just blew me away that she could just make a statement like that, having probably done cursory research on an internet that's skeptical of all this stuff anyway. And a lot of those children who are in trouble that she thinks we should be after are in the very category that she's, gaslighting, right? So anyway, I could go on and on about this because it just makes me so darn mad, but they are pulling this out, and it kind of breaks my heart, Tom, to see an entire young generation of teenagers up through 30-year-olds now running around in their Hellfire Club jerseys because it's so cool. And there's probably going to be a reemergence of D&D. I don't think it ever went away, but the pop culture is making this stuff popular, and these kids don't know that doors are opening, and then it's all just being mocked and covered up. And here we go again. Nothing new under the sun, right?
Well, yeah, Vic, and you mentioned that video. I honestly, I tried to watch it this morning and I couldn't.
I know.
I started it and I was cringing so bad. I was just like, oh, I can't handle it. I just don't want to watch it right now, and I had to shut it off. Why would people make it their business to discredit something that was supposedly discredited 30 years ago and that's not real? Okay, for example, the group, the Satanic Temple. they have a branch of the Satanic Temple called Gray Matter that's dedicated to debunking satanic ritual abuse. You know, the thing about these occultists, and a lot of them, you know, occultists, the Satanic Temple, you know, whether it's especially that group there that, you know, they seem to believe that everybody else is involved in child abuse, but except for Satanists.
Right.
Satanists don't do it. It doesn't exist, you know. I mean, as far as I know, which is kind of very hypocritical.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to a Satanist a couple months ago, and I did an interview with him. You guys can see it on our new Through the Black channel. And I actually talked to him for like 2 hours after we did that little clip.
Wow.
And I began talking to him about satanic ritual abuse, and he had never heard of it. And by this time, him and we kind of became friends, you know. I was very, you know, nice to him and polite, and we had a very civil conversation. And I told him what I do, because he eventually asked, you know. I approached him kind of as an interviewer, and then he was like, well, what do you believe? And then when he asked that, I told him everything, you know. And I said, hey, we have, you know, so many people, you know, seeking help from us that we can't get to them all, that were abused by Satanists, generational Satanists. And I explained it to him, you know. And I told him about the Hampstead case, and I told him about this. He was really interested in what I had to say. And he seemed to believe what I was saying. He was like, man, this is very unjust, what you're telling me. And he said, if this is happening, then I'm against it. Okay.
Wow.
And then he asked me, he said, let me ask you this. You seem to be exposing Satanists. Would you expose people in church that go to church that are abusing kids? I said, yeah, we do it all the time. We don't care what church you go to, or what you do, or who you are, or where you come from. If you're, you know, abusing kids, we want to expose it, you know. And I told him that. He said, okay. And he was a little bit surprised, you know. It's so funny, kind of the bubble that some of these people live in, and they really believe these things about Christians. They actually believe things about Christians that Christians believe about Satanists, right? Like, we're abusers, we're evil, horrible people, you know. It's kind of insane, you know. Anyway, I have just a stack of books that I'm going to go through here, just to give an example of some of the things that have been written about Satanism. Okay, now a lot of these books kind of go back, and probably the things that are happening right now, books will be written about them in 20 years, should the Lord tarry, right? But this book here, I showed you, the Franklin cover-up. This is the book that really was a game changer for me. When I read this book, I was blown away. The subtitle, Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska. It was written by John DeCamp, who is a Nebraska senator, who was a Nebraska senator for 16 years. And I like to mention that he was never sued for this book. He names names, and he tells the story. He talks about how they killed the first guy that was doing the investigation. Gary, can't remember what his name is. Starts with a C. But anyway, the Nebraska cover-up. Here's a book called Blasphemous Rumors. It's about all the things, all the satanic ritual abuse, but it happens in the UK. Kind of interesting that you could kind of superimpose these cases over cases in the United States. And children in the UK were saying the same thing that children in the United States and children around the world were saying that they were witnessing, okay? Keep in mind that everything that we've brought to America, the generational Satanism, we inherited it from there, okay, from other places around the world. We're a young country. We are only 200 years old. So here's a book that, from what I understand, this author did get sued, and the book is out of print. The New Satanist, Linda Blood. It talks about, I have not read this book, by the way, but I'm just using it as an example. It talks about a connection between Michael Aquino, Anton LaVey, and what went behind the scenes. Here's another book, and I could just kind of go on. The Day Satan Called. Okay, a radio DJ tries to help a woman that calls in. Him and his wife let this woman into her house. Crazy things start happening. They find out she's doing satanic rituals and running from a satanic cult. Now, let me mention, haven't watched this. I think you're caught up on this. There's a recent series called The Devil in Ohio, which is basically very similar to this book here. I'm behind. I want to see that. Breaking the Circle of Satanic Ritual Abuse. The cases in this book actually took place around Strongsville, Cleveland, Ohio area, somewhere in there. So here's another book. And this is just a sampling of the books that are out there. Ritual Abuse in the 21st Century. If you look at this book, there's a long list of doctors that had contributed to all the chapters in this book, okay? Secret Weapons, written by Dale Griffiths, okay? And this is the story about mind control and Satanism. But Vic, also there are some books that are being written on the other side, okay? And this is a book I picked up a few years ago called Satanic Panic, okay? And this is just kind of a book that kind of pokes fun at all of those things in the 80s that made up Satanic Panic. And it says Satanic Panic, Pop Culture Paranoia in the 1980s. Well, I'm telling you what, it's not paranoia. It's not a myth. And the people that have suffered, the people that have been abused are out there, and they're still seeking help. Their stories are real. In some cases, we have a lot of evidence. In some cases, we have no evidence. Of course, people that know me know that I made a movie on this 6 years ago. Probably everybody listening to me has already seen the movie Detestable, okay? But we are on a mission to continually expose this, okay? Even though our mentor Russ is gone, Shelley Dizdar is gone, there are people that have been trained up by him that are here to expose this, to come after these people, you know, in Jesus' name, and say, hey, we know what you're doing and you're not going to get away with it. And ultimately, the Bible says vengeance is mine. Okay. One day they're going to have to face the judgment seat of Christ. We believe that there's salvation for many of them. I don't know, you know, obviously these people's hearts might be hardened and reprobate and things like that. Very possible. But we are on a mission to expose these things. And going into 2023, we're going to ramp it up even more. Okay. We have some things, you know, that are planned. I can't really get into them right now. But Vic, I want to come back and I want to encourage the people listening. I don't know who you are. I don't know who's watching this. It could be one person. It could be 100. Okay. And if somebody's actually made it through this far, hey, give yourself a hand clap. Maybe you made it through this far to hear me, you know, basically say it again. Are you called to do this? Are you called to support the people that do? Where do you fit in? The church cannot be silent about this, okay? This is a real epidemic, okay? The Satanists their weapon is invisibility, okay? The law of the Luciferian, taught to us by Greg Reed. Tomorrow's, the guarantee of our tomorrow is today's belief that we don't exist. Something like that is they are covering up these things. There's a reason why we had so much evidence in Hampstead in the UK, and it basically just got dismissed and overlooked because the powers that be, okay, and I'm assuming that we are in, you know, like-minded company, Vic. They believe that, okay, the politicians, the bankers, the elites, the celebrities, many of them, I don't believe all of them, but many of them are caught up in this, okay? I don't have physical evidence of these things, but there's some evidence that we can observe and say, okay, this person is doing this. This person is admitted to this. There's some kind of occultism going on. But maybe you hung on this long to hear us say again, what are you going to do?
Mm.
Hey, Tom Dunn, Vicki Joy, we don't call you. We don't call people in the ministry. God does. God calls you. And if you have a peace about this, then maybe you're called into it. Maybe if you lose peace about walking away from this, maybe you're called into it. I don't know. I sure wouldn't do it if I wasn't called. And also at the same time, Vic, it would be wrong for me to go the other way, and I am called to do it. And I'll be honest with you, I have conversations with God about this, and I'm like, Lord, are you sure you got the right guy? Are you sure you got the right guy? Because I'm totally cool stepping aside. This, you know, I'm not naive that there's a danger to this, but like I said, the safest place that we can be is in the center of God's will. Vic?
Yeah. I think that we're called to expose the deeds of the devil. That doesn't mean everybody does it the way we do or does it on this level.
Right.
But as believers, we are all called in one way or another to expose those deeds. And so, like I said, it doesn't mean you have to do what Russ did. It doesn't mean you have to do what me and Tom are doing, but you do need to be doing something to expose the deeds of the devil. And our whole entire culture now is an example of what happens when the church forgets that calling and says somebody else can do it, or there's a ministry out there that can do it. When nobody is the one that wants to expose it, it creeps into the church, it dilutes the doctrine, and it changes the whole culture. We're in a shifting. We've gone beyond postmodernism now. We're going into godless agnostic territory here, and so I just would challenge you to pray and say, okay, Father, I know that I've been called to expose the deeds of the devil. What does that look like for me? What's my part?
Exactly. You know, we should be cutting edge as the body of Christ, okay? But in many ways, the enemy is running circles around us. And they're able to get away with this, okay? Just because the church has its head in the sand. And at the very least, we're asking you, and this is not for everybody, but for somebody, remove your head from the sand, okay? And I say that kind of jokingly, you know, and you know, having a little bit of fun. But I was there. I put my head in the sand, and when I took it out, you know what I did? I put it right back in, okay? Because I didn't want to know. And you're in good company. You know, think about Elijah, and I've said this before. Here's a man that took on the prophets of Baal in a crazy power encounter. And then there was a point in his ministry where he was like, you know what? I just want to die. He released his servant. He went off and he was like, Lord, just go ahead and take me home. Okay. So you're allowed to have a bad day. But one of the things, I guess, Vic, well, I'll say this, and people know this is the film that I made, Detestable. When I made an announcement, I was on a church board. I was in a leadership position on a church board, going to a very kind of a mainstream denomination, not super mainstream. And I remember the night I had tested the spirits, Vic, and I said, Lord, are you sure you want me to do this? Are you sure you want me to do this? And I kept throwing the fleece out there, and it kept coming back. And I was like, okay. And that gave me the confidence just to be able to go forward. And it was really difficult for me to mention this to people. But like I said, I had the confidence to do it. You know, God gave me the strength to do it. So I was at a board meeting one night, and I said, okay. They said, okay, board meeting's over. And I was like, well, wait. Let me just say one thing. And I need to let you guys know that the Lord is calling me to make this movie. Now, it's kind of crazy because I'd never made a movie before, right? So here's a guy that's saying, I never made a movie, but I'm about to make a movie. And this is what I'm going to make it on. And I gave everybody a CD with a testimony on there from a local psychiatrist who had who knew about these cases, and then I gave them a printout of a newspaper on a story where it was locally, and I just gave them a brief thing, and I said, if any of you guys were making a movie like this, I would want to know. And when I told them that pretty much was like the I pretty much canceled myself in that church, and people were afraid of me after that. And I don't know if they were embarrassed for me, like, okay, this guy thinks he's going to make a movie, or they were like, this dude is out of his freaking mind. I don't want to. They didn't want to pass me in the hall. Not one of them that was in the group. Now, I did have a friend that was in, that was on the board. He did ask me, and he did say, what can I do to help? But all the rest of them, they never asked me, how is it going? Is there anything I can do to help? Can I pray for you? No, I freaked them out big time. And wow, these were Christians. That should not be. That should not be. So that would be the main message of all of the things that we're saying is, don't act like you don't know us when we're out there, maybe.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we all have stories like that, Tom. And I've told this story on the show before. But my dad worked for a large mega church at one point in his life on the missions department, and huge church, probably like 5,000 membership, big city. And he went to the counseling pastor at that time and said, in a church this size, there has to be multiples. There has to be people with DID or who are SRA. And I think he gave this person Rust materials or Rust training or a book or something. I don't know. And the materials were refused, and the counseling pastor was like, oh, I know about all this stuff. I know about it all. And I know you're right. He goes, I'm not touching that with a 100-foot pole. This was the counseling pastor in a mega church. And I don't know what those reasons were, and I don't want to speculate, and I don't know if it was fear or, I don't know, but I'm not touching that with a 100-foot pole was the response of the biblically trained counseling pastor in the church.
That's insane. Right after I released that movie, I left that church, and I felt the Lord had released me from that. And let me just say, I don't think I'm smarter or better than any of those people. I really don't. They were good people, but they were also very fearful. Yeah, and that's sad. And I just it just didn't make sense for me to hang around there anymore. And I resigned my position, and then my wife and I ended up leaving the church. And I just I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of crazy looking back on it now, but hopefully these stories can inspire you guys. We would love to kind of hear from you, and I'm looking for my I'm kind of looking for my email here. throughtheblack.connect@outlook.com. If this presentation has any meaning to you, we would love to hear the feedback. Okay, you guys can reach us at throughtheblack.com as well, and we would love to hear from you. Don't forget, I know Vicki's already done a presentation. She has a book. They only come out at night, and I've got some movies. You can find all that stuff at throughtheblack.com. This is all we got for this year, and if the Lord tarries and if it's okay with Chris and Liz, maybe we'll get invited back next year. Chris and Liz, we love you from the bottom of our hearts, and all of the Take on the World community. We will see you guys next time. All right. Bye, guys.